You're fired. Security, get this liar out of my building. Her voice echoed through the marble lobby of Castellano Media Group in Midtown Manhattan. Every head turned, interns, executives, the cleaning crew mid-shift. All eyes locked on the scene unfolding by the revolving doors. Brooklyn Hayes stood there, designer heels planted on imported Italian marble, perfectly manicured, finger pointed at the man in the rumpled delivery jacket. Her face was flushed with righteous fury, her $3,000 Armani suit practically vibrating with indignation. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding." The security guard started. "No misunderstanding. This fraud tried to pass himself off as a courier to get inside our offices. He's corporate espionage. I saw him taking photos of our confidential documents. Before this goes any further, if you've ever believed in taking a chance on someone, in choosing hard over comfort, please stay with us. Subscribing, liking, or sharing the story isn't about supporting a channel. It's about standing behind stories that remind us who we are. If that matters to you, even a little, stay." The man she was accusing stood perfectly still. Dark hair slightly too long, 3-day stubble, wearing a weather jacket with "Quick Deliver NYC" stitched on the chest. He held a beat-up phone in one hand and a coffee-stained clipboard in the other, and his eyes, gray, cold, utterly calm, stared at Brooklyn like she was the most fascinating disaster he'd ever witnessed. "I was delivering your lunch order," he said quietly. "From Zabber's. The salmon bagel with extra capers. Your assistant ordered it." "Liar. I saw you." Brooklyn's voice cracked. "I saw you photograph the Henderson merger files on Jessica's desk. Do you know what corporate espionage costs? Do you know what you've done?" "I took a photo of a sandwich," the man said, holding up his phone, "to confirm the order, as we're required to do, for customer service." The security guard looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Hayes, maybe we should call the police. I want this man arrested, and I want his company, Quick Deliver, sued into oblivion. We'll take everything they have, every van, every contract. I'll personally make sure they never work in the city again." The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Something dangerous. "You're absolutely sure about that?" he asked softly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You targeted us. You tried to steal from us. And I promise you, by tomorrow morning, your pathetic little delivery company won't exist." "Interesting." He pulled out a business card, placed it on the security desk. "When you're done destroying Quick Deliver, give me a call. I'd like to discuss purchasing Castellano Media Group. I'll give you fair market value. $47 million should cover it." Brooklyn laughed, sharp, mocking. "You? Buy MY Company? A delivery driver is going to buy a media empire? That's the funniest thing I've heard all year. Not driver, Ms. Hayes." He turned to leave, then paused. "Owner, Quick Deliver is a subsidiary, one of 47 companies I own. But don't worry about that now. Focus on ruining me. Should be entertaining." And then he walked out into the New York rain, leaving Brooklyn Hayes staring at his business card with dawning horror. Dominic Kane, CEO. Kane Industries net worth, $3.2 billion. The same Dominic Kane whose face had been on the cover of Forbes last month. The same Dominic Kane who owned half of Manhattan's commercial real estate. The same Dominic Kane who could buy Castellano Media Group with his monthly interest earnings. The man she just threatened to destroy. The man who'd been delivering her lunch. Brooklyn Hayes had been having a terrible week. Monday, her biggest client, Henderson Corp., threatened to pull their $12 million advertising contract. Tuesday, her father, founder of Castellano Media Group, called from his retirement in the Hamptons to remind her that she'd been CEO for exactly 6 months and the company was already bleeding money. Wednesday morning, she spilled coffee on her white Chanel blouse in the Trader Joe's on Court Street in Brooklyn Heights and had to go home to change, making her late for a meeting that cost him another potential client. By Wednesday afternoon, Brooklyn was running on 4 hours of sleep, too much caffeine, and a crushing way to try and prove she deserved the CEO position she'd inherited from her legendary father. At 32, she was the youngest CEO in Castellano history, also the first woman, also the most scrutinized. The board watched her every move. Her father called daily with suggestions that felt like commands. And the media, the same media her company worked in, loved to speculate about when she'd fail. Brooklyn Hayes, nepotism over merit? New York Business Journal, can Daddy's little girl save Castellano? Manhattan Media Review, she'd stopped reading the articles. They all said the same thing. She wasn't good enough, smart enough, tough enough to run her father's empire. So she compensated by being harder, colder, more ruthless than anyone expected, which is why, when she walked back into the office at 2 p.m. with her third coffee of the day, she was already on edge. Ms. Hayes? Her assistant Jessica looked nervous. Your lunch is here. From Zabbers. Finally, I'm starving. The courier is still here. He said he needs a signature. Brooklyn barely looked up from her phone as she walked toward the lobby. Another email from her father. Board meeting Friday. Be prepared. They're questioning the Henderson renewal terms. She was so focused on typing a response that she almost walked into the delivery guy. Ms. Hayes, your order. She glanced up, grabbed the bag without looking at him. Thanks. I need a signature. Jessica handles that. Company policy requires the ordering party to sign if they're present. Brooklyn sighed, finally looked at him properly, and stopped. He wasn't what she expected. Most delivery guys rushing through Manhattan looked harried, rushed. This one stood perfectly still, like he had all the time in the world. Dark hair, gray eyes that assessed her with unsettling calm, and hands that didn't look like they spent all day hauling packages. Fine. She scribbled on his electronic tablet, without reading. Done. You didn't read what you signed. I signed for a bagel. I think I'll survive. Good policy. Trust everyone. There was something in his tone, amusement, judgment. Brooklyn bristled. Excuse me? Nothing. Enjoy your lunch, Ms. Hayes. He walked away, and Brooklyn felt oddly unsettled, like she just failed a test she didn't know she was taking. Weird guy, she muttered to Jessica. I thought he was nice. Asked how my day was. That's literally his job. But Brooklyn couldn't shake the feeling that she'd missed something important. Thursday started even worse. Brooklyn arrived at 7 a.m. to find an email from Henderson Corp. Reconsidering partnership. Meeting Friday to discuss termination. If Henderson pulled out, Castellano would lose its biggest client. Her father would have proof she couldn't handle the CEO position. The board would force her out. 6 months. She'd lasted 6 months. Brooklyn spent the morning in crisis mode, calling Henderson, begging for a meeting, trying to salvage the relationship. By noon, she was exhausted, anxious, and ready to snap. That's when she saw him. The delivery guy from yesterday, standing by Jessica's desk, holding his phone up, pointing it at the papers spread across the surface. The Henderson merger documents. Confidential. Proprietary. The exact information a competitor would pay millions for. Brooklyn's blood went cold, then hot, then nuclear. Hey! He looked up, completely calm, like he'd been expecting her. What are you doing? Brooklyn marched over, grabbed his arm. What did you just photograph? Your assistant's lunch order. She wanted proof I got the right sandwich. Liar, those are confidential documents. I saw you. Ms. Hayes, I swear, Jessica started. Not now. Brooklyn's voice rose. 6 months of stress, failure, and fear boiled over. This is corporate espionage. Do you know what you've done? Do you know what this costs? I photographed a pastrami on rye. The man said evenly, show me your phone. No. Security. That's when everything exploded. Security came running. Brooklyn demanded they call the police. The man, Dominic, though she didn't know that yet, stood perfectly still and let her bury herself. Let her threaten. Let her promise to destroy his company. Let her reveal exactly how paranoid, how desperate, how close to breaking she really was. And when he finally left, business card on the security desk, Brooklyn felt victorious for about 30 seconds. Then Jessica said quietly, "Ms. Hayes, he really was just photographing my sandwich. I asked him to. I'm trying this new diet and I—" "What?" And also, Jessica's voice got smaller. "The Henderson documents? I put those away an hour ago. They weren't on my desk. He couldn't have seen them." The floor tilted. "What?" "I think you might have just accused him of something he didn't do." Brooklyn grabbed the business card with shaking hands. Dominic Kane. She Googled him right there in the lobby. Watch your phone load image after image. Forbes covers. Business journal profiles. Society pages from charity galas. Dominic Kane, billionaire, self-made, owner of Kane Industries, a conglomerate that included real estate, tech startups, and yes, a small delivery company he'd apparently acquired as part of a larger portfolio. The man who could buy her entire company without blinking. The man she'd just threatened to destroy. "Oh, God," Brooklyn whispered. "Oh, God, what did I do?" Sometimes our worst moments come from our deepest fears. We lash out not because people have wronged us, but because we're terrified of failing, because we're drowning and we grab at anything, anyone, to keep our heads above water, even if it means pulling someone else under. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you watched someone self-destruct because they couldn't see past their own panic. Maybe you understand why Brooklyn's standing in that lobby right now, realizing she just made the worst mistake of her career. And maybe, if you've ever jumped to conclusions that destroyed something beautiful before it could begin, you know exactly why what happens next matters so much. Brooklyn spent Thursday evening in hell. First, she called every number associated with Kane Industries. Got assistants, voicemails, automated messages. Dominic Kane did not take calls from random CEOs who'd accused him of corporate espionage. Second, she tried to find his personal number. Impossible. Billionaires don't list their cell phones. Third, she tried to visit his office. Was stopped by security who very politely informed her that Mr. Kane was unavailable and would she like to schedule an appointment for sometime in the next quarter? "This is urgent." "I'm sure it is, ma'am. Unfortunately, Mr. Kane's schedule is quite full." By 11 p.m., Brooklyn was sitting in her Brooklyn Heights apartment, the one she refused to give up even after becoming COO, even though her father kept insisting she should move to Manhattan like a serious executive. Staring at her phone, she drafted 17 texts, deleted them all. "I'm sorry" sounded pathetic. "I made a mistake" sounded weak. "Please don't sue me" sounded desperate. All true, none sendable. Finally, at midnight, she did the only thing that made sense. She showed up at the Zabbers on the Upper West Side at 6 a.m. Friday morning and waited. If Dominic Kane owned Quick Deliver, and Quick Deliver operated out of a warehouse near Zabbers, according to her frantic Google research, maybe, just maybe, he'd show up. It was stupid. It was desperate. It was all she had. Dominic Kane walked into Zabbers at 6:47 a.m., ordered black coffee and a bagel with lox, and was halfway through New York Times business section when an exhausted-looking woman in yoga pants and a Columbia sweatshirt collapsed into the chair across from him. "I'm sorry." He looked up, took in Brooklyn Hayes. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd slept as much as he had, which was not at all. "Ms. Hayes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. You weren't taking photos of confidential documents. You were doing your job. And her voice cracked. "I accused you of something horrible because I was stressed and paranoid, and I'm a terrible person who jumps to conclusions and ruins people's lives, and I'm so sorry." Dominic sipped his coffee. Okay. You apologized. I accept. Brooklyn blinked. That's it. What else do you want? A dramatic scene? Groveling? You made a mistake. You owned it. We're done. But I threatened to destroy your company. You threatened to destroy Quick Deliver, a company I bought for $200,000 3 years ago as a tax write-off. It makes about $50,000 a year in profit. You'd have to work very hard to destroy it. I didn't know. Obviously. He folded his newspaper. Why were you so convinced I was corporate espionage? Brooklyn hesitated. Then, because she'd already humiliated herself completely, she told him the truth about Henderson threatening to leave, about her father's legacy, about being the youngest, first female CEO and feeling like everyone was waiting for her to fail, about 6 months of stress and fear, and the crushing weight of trying to prove she deserved something everyone assumed she'd gotten through nepotism. So, when I saw you with your phone near those documents, she finished, I panicked. I thought someone was trying to sabotage me. I thought, she stopped, I thought if I lost Henderson, I'd lose everything. So I attacked first. Dominic studied her. You know what your problem is? I have many. Please be specific. You're trying to be your father. The observation hit like a slap. What? Castellano Media Group was built on your father's reputation, his connections, his style, and you're trying to replicate that instead of creating your own. That's not. It's exactly right. I've read about you. Brooklyn Hayes, trying to fill impossibly large shoes. But here's the thing. Your father built his empire in the 1980s. Different era, different rules. If you want Castellano to survive, you can't be him. You have to be you. And who's that? I don't know. Who are you when you're not performing CEO? Brooklyn opened her mouth, closed it, realized she had no answer. That's what I thought. Dominic stood. Good luck, Ms. Hayes. Try not to destroy any more innocent delivery guys. He walked out, leaving Brooklyn sitting alone with her coffee and a question she couldn't answer. Friday afternoon, Brooklyn sat in the boardroom at Castellano Media Group, preparing for professional execution. The Henderson court meeting was at 2 p.m. They'd terminate the contract. The board would lose confidence. Her father would gently suggest she step down. 6 months. She lasted 6 months. At 1:55 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Henderson Corp just renewed their contract. 3 years. $15 million annually. Congratulations. Brooklyn stared at the message. Type back. Who is this? Someone who believes you're better than you think you are. Now stop trying to be your father and figure out who Brooklyn Hayes actually is. DK. The Henderson Corp representatives walked in at 2 p.m. sharp, smiling, ready to sign. Brooklyn barely heard their explanations about reconsidering the partnership and seeing real value in the Castellano vision. All she could think about was DK, Dominic Kane, who'd somehow impossibly save her company. Sometimes the people we wrong become the people who save us. Sometimes the person we attack in our darkest moment turns out to be the one who sees our light when we can't see it ourselves. Maybe that's because hurt people, but healed people heal people. Maybe it's because some souls recognize each other even through the chaos. If you've ever been saved by someone you didn't deserve, someone who showed you grace when you'd shown them nothing but fear, then maybe you understand why Brooklyn's sitting in that boardroom right now, realizing that Dominic Kane just gave her something infinitely more valuable than a contract. He gave her a chance to become who she's supposed to be. Brooklyn spent the weekend trying to figure out what happened. How had Dominic Kane convinced Henderson Corp to not only stay, but increase their contract? What had he said? What had he offered? Monday morning, she finally got answers. Mr. Kane reached out personally. Henderson's CEO told her over the phone. Said he'd been following our company. Offered to partner on a new venture, real estate advertising using AI technology his company developed. Said he wanted Castellano Media to handle the marketing. Basically made it too lucrative for us to leave. Why would he do that? He said, and I'm quoting here, Brooklyn Hayes is building something important. She just needs people to stop waiting for her to fail and start helping her succeed. Honestly, Ms. Hayes, if a billionaire believes in you that much, so do we. Brooklyn sat in her office after the call, staring at Dominic Kane's business card. He'd saved her company, saved her reputation, asked for nothing in return. Why? She called his office. Got the same assistant. I need to speak with Mr. Kane. It's urgent. Mr. Kane is currently in Hong Kong. He'll return next week. Would you like to schedule? Tell him Brooklyn Hayes says thank you, and tell him I owe him dinner. I'll pass that along, Ms. Hayes. She thought that would be the end of it. Dominic would ignore her message. She'd send flowers or something equally inadequate, and they'd never speak again. But at 11 p.m. that night, her phone buzzed. Dinner sounds perfect, but I choose the place. And fair warning, I don't do fancy. Hope you're okay with that. DK. Brooklyn stared at the message. Type back. Where and when? Katz's Deli. Saturday, 7 p.m. Try not to accuse me of espionage this time. Despite everything, she laughed, Katz's Delicatessen on the Lower East Side was the opposite of every restaurant Brooklyn had been to for business meetings. Loud, crowded, worn linoleum floors and photographs covering the walls. The smell of pastrami and pickles thick in the air. The kind of place that didn't care if you were a CEO or a billionaire. You waited in line like everyone else. Brooklyn arrived at 7:05 p.m. wearing jeans and a sweater, the most casual she dressed for a business meeting in years, and found Dominic already at a table in the back. He wore jeans too, a simple gray Henley, no designer labels, nothing that screamed wealth. You're late, he said. Traffic. Good excuse. He'd already ordered 2 pastrami sandwiches, 2 cream sodas, a side of lax. I didn't know what you wanted. So you order everything? Welcome to Katz's. You eat family style or you're doing it wrong. They ate. The sandwiches were enormous, messy, perfect. Brooklyn couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't a working lunch or a power dinner. So, Dominic said after a while, did you figure it out? Figure what out? Who Brooklyn Hayes is when she's not being CEO. Brooklyn set down her sandwich. I've been thinking about that, and I realize I don't know. I went from being Victor Castellano's daughter straight to being CEO. I never had a chance to just be Brooklyn. So, who do you want to be? Honestly, someone who doesn't eat lunch at her desk every day. Someone who doesn't work 80-hour weeks trying to prove she's worthy. Someone who, she stopped. Why do you care? Because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet, which is potential. Not to be your father, not to run his company his way, but to build something new, something better, something yours. Brooklyn studied him. Why did you help me? With Henderson? You could have let me fail. Because I've been where you are. Taking over something built by someone else. Trying to prove you deserve it. Making mistakes because you're too scared to be human. You're Dominic Kane. You built Kane Industries from nothing. After inheriting my father's failing real estate company, I was 24. Everyone said I'd run it into the ground within a year. So I worked insane hours, made ruthless decisions, became someone I didn't recognize. And yeah, I saved the company. But I lost myself in the process. What changed? I realized that success built on fear isn't success. It's just a prettier version of failure. He leaned forward. You want to know why I was delivering sandwiches from Quick Deliver? I assumed it was some billionaire eccentric thing. I'd do it once a month. Spend a day working at one of my companies. Remembering what real work feels like. Staying connected to the people who actually make everything run. He smiled. Usually it's fine. Then I met you. And I accused you of corporate espionage. You were terrified. Drowning, acting out of fear. I recognize it, because I'd been there. So instead of being angry, I decided to help. By saving my company, by showing you that you're capable of more than you think, that you don't have to be your father to succeed. That Brooklyn Hayes, just Brooklyn, is enough. Tears stung her eyes. Why are you being so nice to me? I was horrible to you. Because I see potential. And because, he hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Because in that moment when you were falling apart in your lobby, defending your company with everything you had, you reminded me why I love business in the first place. The passion, the fire. You just needed someone to redirect it. So this is mentorship? You're like my business fairy godmother. I'm more of a fairy godfather, but sure. Brooklyn laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. They spent 3 hours at Katz's, talking about business, life, the difference between building something and inheriting something. Dominic told her about growing up in Queens, working construction jobs to pay for NYU, taking risks that terrified him. Brooklyn told him about growing up in her father's shadow, about Columbia Business School, where everyone knew her name before they knew her, about the crushing pressure of legacy. You know what's funny? Brooklyn said as they walked out into the cold New York night. I spent 6 months trying to be CEO, but tonight, just being myself, I learned more about leadership than I did in any boardroom. That's because leadership isn't about the title. It's about knowing who you are and leading from that truth. They stood on the Lower East Side sidewalk, yellow cabs streaming past, the city alive around them. Thank you, Brooklyn said softly, for seeing something in me, for helping, for this. You're welcome. Dominic pulled out his phone. I'm sending you something. An opportunity. New client, potential partnership. But it's risky, unconventional. Everything your father would tell you to avoid. Why send it to me? Because I want to see what Brooklyn Hayes does when she trusts herself instead of trying to be someone else. He walked away, leaving Brooklyn standing on the sidewalk with her phone buzzing, and a feeling she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or possibility, or something that felt dangerously close to falling. The opportunity Dominic sent was insane. A tech startup wanted to launch a revolutionary social media platform. They had the technology, the vision, but no marketing infrastructure. They wanted Castellano Media to handle everything: branding, launch, advertising. The catch? They couldn't pay up front. They were offering equity instead. A huge gamble. If the platform failed, Castellano got nothing. If it succeeded, Brooklyn sat in her office Monday morning, staring at the proposal. Her father would say no. Too risky. Not the Castellano way. The board would probably agree. Equity deals were gambling. Castellano didn't gamble. But Brooklyn looked at the proposal and saw something else. An opportunity to build something new. To take a risk. To be Brooklyn instead of her father's daughter. She called an emergency board meeting. I want to take this deal. Silence. Then chaos. That's insane. We don't do equity deals. Your father would never. My father isn't CEO anymore. I am. Brooklyn stood, feeling steadier than she had in months. And I believe in this company. I believe in taking smart risks. And most importantly, I believe that Castellano Media needs to evolve or die. We can't keep doing business like it's 1985. The world changed. We need to change with it. And if the startup fails, then we learn from it. But if it succeeds, we'll have equity in the next big platform. We'll be pioneers instead of followers. The board voted. Split decision. Brooklyn had the final call. She thought about her father, about legacy, about 6 months of trying to be someone she wasn't. Then she thought about Dominic at Katz's Deli, telling her that success built on fear wasn't success at all. We're taking the deal. The tech startup launched in April. By May, it had 10 million users. By June, it was valued at $500 million. Castellano Media's equity stake was suddenly worth $50 million. Brooklyn Hayes was on the cover of Forbes, the new face of media. how Brooklyn Hayes reinvented her father's legacy. Her father called from the Hamptons. "I'm proud of you," he said, and for once, it didn't sound like criticism disguised as praise. It sounded real. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you feel something, pause for a moment, or see life a little differently, please don't let it end here. These stories take heart, time, and care to create, and your support is what keeps them alive. Subscribing, liking, or sharing isn't just a click. It's a quiet way of saying this mattered. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please stay with us.